Welcome back to the show, week 19, still no title, but we're going to carry on without it. Yes, we are still in the same studio. We are still waiting to move into our new temporary space that we'll have. We did shoot a small little special project there today, which you'll be finding out about in the next few weeks, maybe the next few months. It's going to be very exciting, but I can't actually divulge any information about it right now. It's going to be a short little pickup show. I've started to film clips throughout the week, and so these Saturday shows by necessity don't need to be as long, but we do have 5 awesome stories. So we're going to start the day by 2 stories about Fox News. We're going to rip them a new one for a couple of the crazy things that they've been talking about over the past few days. And then we're going to move over to folding cars, extreme weather events, and the Olympics in 2020. All interesting stories that I've been excited all day to talk about. But first, Fox News. Excuse me. I'm going to Marco Rubio at the very beginning of the program this week. Fox News host Dana Perino is sick of you atheists complaining about Christianity ramming itself down your throat and feels that if you don't like it, you can just move to another country. And so I'm talking about The 5 on Fox News. They were talking about a case that's currently being debated in front of the Massachusetts State Supreme Court, and it's a case of the sort you've probably heard about before. A group of parents is not happy with the fact that under God is part of the Pledge of Allegiance, and so an atheist lawyer named David Niosi is arguing that it should be taken out. Bob Beckel is explaining this story, and even he, the liberal of the 5, seems to think that they should stop complaining. But he tees it up to Dana Perino, and she says what she thinks about it.
I'm tired of them. I remember working at the Justice Department years ago when I first started, I think it was right after 9/11, and a lawsuit like this came through. And before the day had finished, the United States Senate and the House of Representatives had both passed resolutions saying that they were for keeping under God in the pledge. I think that our representatives have spoken over and over again, and that if these people really don't like it, they don't have to live here.
Yeah, that's a good point. But does anybody know whether this under God was added to the pledge, or was it part of it? It was?
It was added. It doesn't matter, though.
Plus, if you don't believe, then why do you care?
Yeah.
It's just like some guy's name.
Oh, very well put by Dana Perino. Very mature, very understanding argument that totally isn't full of logical consistencies and obvious errors. So I'm going to demonstrate some of them. But first, before we get to that, I love the little thing at the end. Does anyone really believe that Bob Beckel doesn't know that under God was added later on in 1954 to the Pledge of Allegiance? Is it possible that he doesn't know that? He's been involved in American government for decades now. And I don't know which is worse, that he would be lying about it or that he actually wouldn't know. But then Eric Bolling corrects him. Eric Bolling apparently does know, but then says, oh, but it doesn't matter. Although it obviously does matter, and we're going to get to that over the course of this. But there's a couple things in what Dana Perino said that I want to tear apart. So first of all, the idea that you should just move if you don't like it. Now, this is something that people on the right and the left love to throw at each other whenever anyone complains about politics, but that's not exactly how a representative democracy works. You see, if you don't like something about the country, you try to change it, and that is how our country has been developed over the course of hundreds of years. Different political parties, different political interest groups, duking it out on the national stage and setting policies that we then follow. And also, she says there, one of the weirdest things, and maybe I'm focusing on this unnecessarily, but she says, it's just a name. Why does it bother you if you don't believe in it? Well, that's interesting. Let's test to see if she actually believes what she's saying. So well, here are some other names. Thor, Voldemort, or he who must not be named if you don't want to court unnecessary danger. Allah, perhaps. These are all names that she certainly doesn't believe in. She doesn't think that Thor actually looks down on us and occasionally throws lightning bolts when necessary. If I were to put Harry Potter in the Pledge of Allegiance, would you say, well, I don't believe in it, so what's the difference? I have a feeling, Dana Perino, that is not actually the case. I have a feeling that you're talking out your ass, and you totally would not want anything you don't believe in being in the Pledge of Allegiance. And having it be repeated every single day in front of your children, telling them this is what you should believe. You should believe in Thor. You should believe that we are a country under Voldemort. No, she wouldn't actually like that. Let's jump outside of the Pledge of Allegiance thing. Gay marriage. A lot of the debate seems to be focused on the whole marriage thing. They don't like the fact that it's being redefined. Redefined. That means, it's just a word. It means something. They're using it to mean something else. It's just a word, so what do you care? Right, Dana Perino? You don't care about these words. You don't believe it's a real marriage. So what do you care if a gay couple says that they are married? I have a feeling you actually would have a problem with that. So Dana Perino, the whole thing about moving out is totally disingenuous. If she doesn't like a policy, she speaks out about it. Okay, she doesn't move to Chile. So I think that we should expect the same of others. And the whole name thing is very immature as well. But let's move on. Kimberly Guilfoyle, now this isn't being talked about in the articles about this, but I actually found what she said to be more offensive than the Dana Perino stuff. So Kimberly Guilfoyle, the other lady on the 5, she goes even further than Dana Perino. Let's watch.
I'm telling you that I find it offensive that a few people, and these children are pawns from their parents' political statements and beliefs to try and enforce it on everybody else and inflict their belief system. It's incredibly selfish, it's small-minded, and I don't think the court should cater to them. There is no good reason to do so.
That just gets me so heated because it is so lacking in self-understanding. Like, she is exactly describing what she herself wants it in the Pledge of Allegiance for. It is the ultimate in projection on a network that excels in projection. So let's break down a couple of these little things. So she says that the kids are political pawns, okay, that the kids don't actually care one way or another, although in some cases they clearly do. So let me get this straight. In 1954, after a multi-year campaign by different religious and political groups to get under God added to the Pledge of Allegiance, it was added. I don't think it was the kids in 1954 insisting that we recognize their Christian God in the Pledge of Allegiance. And so it seems like the kids in 1954 were political pawns for Christian politicians, for conservative politicians who wanted to enshrine it in the Pledge of Allegiance. I have a feeling that Kimberly Guilfoyle did not have a problem with those kids being treated as political pawns. Only now she has a problem with it. She says that they are trying to advance their political statements and beliefs. Putting under God in the Pledge of Allegiance is literally stating your beliefs in the Pledge of Allegiance and insisting that other people say it. And so she also said that they want to inflict their belief system on us. You're saying that all of those kids need to say, we follow God, we are Christians. That is literally inflicting your belief system on them. Now, I know in some of these schools, the kids don't have to say anything if they don't want to, but they are surrounded by their social group, by their peers, saying that they follow this Christian God, and you, by contrast, you're the outsider. That's a great thing for kids to feel when they're up and coming, when they're so susceptible to peer pressure, is to say that you are the outsider in front of everyone that you know and respect. She also said that the atheists are selfish and small-minded for caring in the first place, although you can see how worked up she got when defending its place in the Pledge of Allegiance. When her particular religious beliefs are currently in it, she doesn't see it as selfish or small-minded to say that it should continue there. And so that's really the problem with all of these arguments. You can't simply say it's crazy to think that it matters that it's in there, because what's the difference? And then vehemently insist that it stay there, showing how important to you it is that it remains there. Now, it's very clear that obviously Christianity has a long tradition in America. The vast majority of the people in America have been Christians for a long time. That's totally true. But there's no need to, from a very early age, insist that Jews and Hindus and Buddhists and atheists and people who follow Shinto and 100 other religions or no religion whatsoever are somehow less or second-class citizens as soon as they're kids and they enter school. There's absolutely no need for that. There's no benefit drawn from talking about God in the first place in that context. And it is so clearly projection when they say that we are forcing our politics and our religious beliefs on them, when that is by design. When you actually look back to 1954, when these Christian organizations, the Knights of Columbus and all of that, were fighting for it to be in the Pledge of Allegiance, it was literally a political campaign. And I can't stand that they are so... The one thing that, as an atheist, you have to get used to in this country is that we say that our religious beliefs are our beliefs to not be religious or being infringed on when they say you have to follow Christianity or you have to respect Christianity. But then they get to retort by saying, when we're not allowed to infringe on you, that is infringing on us. And unfortunately, that's the state of America, and I guess we just have to get used to it. Now, I totally understand that many of the people watching this clip are probably Christians and probably don't see what the big deal is. But imagine if it was under Allah, or under Muhammad, or under Buddha, or any other religious identification or figure or belief system or whatever was included in the Pledge of Allegiance, would you think it was unimportant then that it was being recognized there? And I think that if you are being intellectually consistent and intellectually honest with yourself, you can't say that that's true. You would have a problem with it. So please put yourself in the place of people who are not Christians, who may not have a belief in any religious system whatsoever, and allow them to be free to express or not express that as they desire. And to go one step further out, maybe this will be a topic that we'll tackle at another point. Salon has an editorial where they're in favor of this. Why do we have a Pledge of Allegiance in the first place? Doesn't that seem oddly North Korean, oddly Nazi Germany, that you have to stand and you have to salute and you have to say that you're pledging allegiance to the flag? Not even the country, not the political leaders, the flag, a symbol, an idol that we should bow down in front of. That strikes me as a little bit odd. Feel free to disagree. But Fox, of course, has multiple programs, and so they are able to offend on multiple fronts on any given day, and so they did just that on another show. Gretchen Carlson was on Fox and Friends, and she had Thomas Kersting. Now, he is a therapist and a school counselor, and they were debating, along with another lady, an issue that's going on right now in some school systems where they are, of course, obligated to provide lower-cost lunches or free lunches to people who apply for that program and are eligible for it. And so up until now, they've been feeding the kids who their parents don't sign them up for the program, although conceivably they are eligible for it. And now they're saying we simply can't afford to do that anymore. And so if the kid comes up with his food and he's not signed up for the program, they will simply throw it away. And so Gretchen Carlson tees it up to Thomas Kersting for his opinion.
I mean, I agree with the superintendent sending the letter. I think it's a little harsh. You know, I don't think they're really going to throw the food out right in front of the kid and embarrass the kid.
Tom, do you have a problem with the fact that the kids ultimately end up being punished in this situation? Well, it really is the parents' fault?
I think it's misleading that the kids are going to be punished. We have more food than any other nation. You know, no kid is going to starve. The kid, you know, if one day a kid doesn't have lunch, right, maybe that's a teaching moment where that kid doesn't have lunch. I may sound harsh saying that, but, you know, we got to get people here to start being responsible for themselves. You can't expect everybody to be responsible for you. From almost 20 years working in a school district, they're not going to make the kids starve. That's just kind of like a big warning to the parents, you know, SOS. Start being responsible. They're not going to make the kids starve. And I have kids come to me, I give kids money all the time. Okay. And I'm broke from doing that over there. Right. So I'm kidding.
Good.
Now, before I lay into that, I will say, I guess for Fox and Friends' sake, or to the credit of Gretchen Carlson, the lady that they had on did actually have a lot of empathy for the students and said that they should not be punished for their parents' laziness or lack of ability to complete paperwork and things of that sort. And so I guess to that extent they had some balance, I suppose. But they still did have Thomas Kersting on, and he is apparently totally lacking in normal human warmth and empathy because he thinks that what does it matter if the kids go hungry for a while? So a couple of the things that he said. One, I don't really care if they throw the food away right in front of the kids or if they put it underneath the desk and then throw it away. It's still being thrown away. It's saying, we care so much about getting those couple of dollars from you that we will throw it in the trash and we will make you shamed or simply deprived of the food that you were expecting you would be able to eat because your parents didn't complete paperwork. Not you, your parents. And so you are literally being punished, and not just a slap on the wrist or something. We're saying you're going to go through the rest of your day without eating. And by the way, if we want our kids to do well in school, maybe depriving them of nutrition in the middle of the day is not the best way to do it, because I know if I don't take constant food and caffeine, I can't think straight. I have to imagine that for kids is a similar thing. And so a couple of the other things that they say, he goes on to say, well, we have lots of food in America. And what I love about that is this is a guy who, going by what he says, has worked in school systems for a couple of decades. I don't know what school systems he's worked in. I would guess probably affluent ones. Yes, America does have more food on average than most other countries. Yes, many of us can afford to eat unhealthy food that makes us obese, seemingly eating more food than we need. But that doesn't mean that every kid in every school system across the country does not actually go to sleep hungry at times, or that meal that he gets at school isn't, one, a large portion of the food he eats every day, or two, the majority of the actual nutrition he gets every day, based on what I know about the way that most parents in America feed their kids. And of course, the kids can only be held so accountable for that since they don't have any money. Unless, of course, you want them to work in elementary school, and I imagine some people on Fox News probably would. And so it's very easy for him, inside of whatever bubble he currently exists in, to say, well, look, it's a slap on the wrist. They won't eat, but then they go home and then they eat. It's a very Rush Limbaugh sort of argument to make. Well, if they're hungry, go to the fridge. A lot of the kids, there's so many kids every day in America who go to sleep hungry, who don't get enough food or don't get any food on some days. And so I hate the idea that he just brushes it off as whatever, they'll be fine as soon as they get home. And then, of course, he throws in the broke joke. Well, my kids come for allowance all the time and I give it to them, and now I'm broke in my suit on national news. No, I don't buy that at all. Just because your kids needed a little bit of extra money to buy some more Pokemon cards or an iPhone or whatever, that doesn't mean that there aren't kids around the country who are not doing so well, whose parents can't afford to give them tons of money whenever they need it. And yes, the idea of kids going hungry is a very real thing, Thomas Kersting. I know you're brought on there for sort of, I guess, faux balance. You bring on the empathic woman who understands the needs of kids, and so you have to bring a heartless asshole as well, right? I guess that's what passes for news in this country. And so I understand it might seem weird that I'm focusing on this so much, since it's it's one school system that they're focusing on here. And I believe that one of the 10 commandments of journalism is proportionality. You should cover the news to the extent that it's important. And so that's why I won't be talking about this every day. But I also think that you have to be willing to point out the underlying ideology that isn't always on display, but exists in the political and media figures that are making decisions in this country. And so Thomas Kersting represents an opinion that is not just held by him, it's held by many. The trouble of poor kids, that's not really trouble. My kids are fine. I'm sure they're fine too. If it's nice and cozy in my bubble, then how bad could it be in urban areas, in poor areas? I'm sure poverty isn't really that bad. I'm sure going hungry isn't really that bad. And that's the sort of frame of mind that actually exists in the people making decisions and talking about the news for the most part on these major channels. They believe things like this, and that's why it's so important when they lay it out for us so clearly, as Thomas Kersting did in this case, that we cover it. And that's why I'm covering it today. Okay, moving away from Fox News, because I think I might actually vomit if I cover them anymore today. It's like really rich gelato or something. It's delicious for a little while, but it leaves you feeling quite sick. But we have some good news, interesting news, international news, sports news, which we don't always cover. And going by the results of the concussion study that I talked about last week, you guys don't seem to care about sports news that much, but I think that this is interesting. Down go Madrid, down go Istanbul. The 2020 Olympics have a home, and it's Tokyo. The Olympics returning to Japan after a very interesting sort of machinations of the voting. And so what seemed to happen is in the first round of voting, Istanbul and Madrid actually tied. And so then there was another round of lobbying. And what actually happened is Abe Shinzo, the Prime Minister of Japan, traveled there to lobby specifically to the people voting. And now the reason that the Prime Minister of Japan needed to travel there is that each one of the countries that was one of the last possible choices to host the Olympics had its own set of problems. And the main problem for Tokyo was that people have worries about, the lingering radiation from the meltdown of Fukushima and all of that. And they were worried about the safety and health of the Olympic athletes. Now, of course, they're not going to be swimming off the bay or anything like that. They're not going to be swimming in the polluted water. I think that it's totally legit to be worried about that. Now, he went there and he told them that it's going to be perfectly safe. And there was a lot of other benefits of Tokyo hosting the Olympics. They hosted the 1964 Summer Games. They have a sense of economic and political stability and all of that many of the other countries around the world at this current time don't have. And so it seems relatively safe to host it there. And the IOC, they're constantly worried about stability and the infrastructure and all of that. And Japan says, look, we have reliable transportation. We will have the facilities for this. They're putting down $4.5 billion as sort of a buffer to build the facilities and make sure that it gets off the ground. And so, and now they have it. Now, Istanbul and Madrid were the last two that were cut, unfortunately, that did not win after the first round of voting. Istanbul, apparently, if you're believing the reports coming from the IOC, suffered a setback back in June when the police in Istanbul responded really harshly to some political protests, some anti-government protests. And so they felt that politically there might not be the stability that they would want for this international event. Madrid, on the other hand, has a high unemployment rate. Their economy is in a lot of trouble. And I think that after the experience of Greece, they don't really mess around with a country's economy that can't necessarily handle the impact of the Olympics. And also doping as well. I was actually familiar with Madrid's experience with doping. And yeah, especially after Greece, like a lot of these countries, there's a lot of international prestige that comes from hosting these Olympics. And it seems like it's got to be a boost to your economy, but unfortunately many of the countries that host us find that they are negatively impacted by having done so. And so perhaps for Istanbul and Madrid, this is actually a good thing. But yeah, so it's going to be very interesting. Tokyo is going to be once again hosting the Olympics. Now they've done the summer before, they've done the Winter Olympics multiple times, and they seem like a go-to choice. I wish it could come back to LA, that would be very exciting. And I have to say that when I found out that it was Tokyo, it seems like once again I am not going to be able to go to the Olympics because it is expensive in the best of times and in the cheapest area. It being in Tokyo brings it even farther out of my reach. Okay, and more international news, or at least something that affects us all in many countries around the world. I apologize. This tea is delicious. I need to drink it occasionally. Another study is confirming that global climate change is having a significant impact in the weather, and not just in terms of the average temperature day to day. No, it's something far larger and far more damaging. A study by the American Meteorological Society has found that about half of the extreme weather events of 2012 can be shown to be impacted by human-caused climate change. And so their impact was much stronger than it would have been absent that climate change caused by our activity around the globe. And so this is obviously very important. Let's talk a bit about the methodology before I expound on what I think about it. Their conclusion was based on a number of different factors, including sea surface temperatures, changes in incoming solar radiation, and many others. And they found that the human influence varies from one event to another. But in about a half of the extreme events that they studied, which included Northern Europe's unusually wet summer to Hurricane Sandy, they found that man-made climate change was a contributing factor. And now, of course, any study on something as large as this, with so many variables involved, and particularly something like the weather, which is it's extremely difficult to predict or let alone explain, is going to be difficult. And so the AMS in their report explained sort of the analogy that they were working with. Adding just a little bit of speed to your highway commute each month can substantially raise the odds that you'll get hurt someday. But if an accident does occur, the primary cause may not be your speed itself. It could be a wet road or a texting driver. And so just because the weather is getting hotter in some areas, precipitation patterns are changing and things like that, that does every single day raise the chance that something like this will happen, but it doesn't mean that every extreme weather event can be traced to climate change. And so that is important. If you are actually interested in the future of our ecosystem and the future of global climate change, you should understand that. Unfortunately, people who believe that humans couldn't possibly have an impact on the weather will probably say, well, look, they're saying it's difficult to trace it to particular events, so why should we even worry about it? And that, unfortunately, is a very dangerous stance, I think, to take on something as important as this. And so for those of you who are worried about the future of climate change, feel free to share this video, and perhaps the findings, which I will link to in the description, will help to change the minds of some of the people that you know who don't believe in climate change currently. Unfortunately, that's unlikely, because people have built up this wall of apathy and fear about the potential economic cost of doing something about this, and this weird sense of awe that how could we have an impact on something as large as our atmosphere, something as diverse and something so large and powerful as the ecosystem and our weather systems. And so when you combine all of that things, it's very easy to deny that we could have any effect. But once again, the American Meteorological Society, adding to the different data that we have, the different studies that have shown that the climate change is real and that it's having a very powerful and measurable impact on our day-to-day lives. This is just more data. Unfortunately, it's not going to convince many of them, but I can only do so much. You can take this information and turn it into a form to sway some of your friends in your social group. And hopefully you can do it soon, because with every passing year, it becomes a little bit harder for us to be able to combat this. And I hope that future techniques, future technologies, and different things of that sort will make us able to, but time is running out. Time is also running out on this program, and so I'm going to do our last little story. This is a fun one, and I'm very interested in what you guys think about this. A video of an experimental armadillo car swept across the internet. You can see it here. Now, you've probably seen this video now, but I'm going to focus on it for a slightly different reason, I think, than most people and all of that, which is perfectly fine. This is the Armadillo T, a foldable electric vehicle that was built by the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology in Daejeon, South Korea. Now, obviously, it's very small. It's powered fully by electricity, which is, of course, important. So some of the stats about the car: it can travel 100 kilometers on a 10-minute charge, which I find to be very interesting. I don't know how they managed to do that charge in just 10 minutes. And has a maximum speed of 60 kilometers per hour, which is about 37 miles per hour. Now, most interestingly is that when it comes time to park, the rear of the vehicle folds over the front, and this can be controlled by your smartphone, almost having its body length to just 1.65 meters. And you can see that after it folds in half, it's very small. And so you can imagine that if lots of people were driving cars like that, parking lots could fit much more cars, streets could fit much more cars, and things of that sort. Now, I am doing this broadcast from LA. Parking is something that I take very seriously, and so this definitely caught my eye. And the reason that I want to bring it up today is I'm very interested in finding out what you think about the future of cars and the compromises that we are or should be willing to make in the future. Now, if you've been watching this for a while, you probably know that I recently bought an all-electric vehicle, and I did it partially because I hope to demonstrate to my audience that you can live day to day with almost no compromises driving an electric car, but also because I'm interested in the future of automotive technology generally, and so I simply had to take the opportunity. But my car is small. Many people would see that to be a compromise that they're not willing to make. It's larger than the Armadillo T, but it is smaller than the average car. And so I have to imagine that many of you watching that video, your first reaction was, there is no way I would drive something as goofy looking as that. Like, I wouldn't feel like a man if I was driving it, or it's not fast enough. And of course, bear in mind that this car isn't even going to be sold. It's not legal for driving, even on South Korea's roads, although they're trying to get an exception made. But something like this, think about, yes, there are costs. It's smaller, it doesn't look as cool, it doesn't, I guess, inflame the senses or the passions in the way that a large roaring V8 does, or something like that, or a very classy looking luxury car. But parking is a big issue. I know all the time people find parking for the studio, complain tons. Now imagine if you could totally eliminate that from your life. Imagine if you didn't have to worry about paying so much money for gas every single day. You didn't have to worry about contributing to pollution and all of that. There's a million different reasons that these compromises are being experimented on. It's more than just worrying about climate change. It's ease of use. It's like throttle response. Electric vehicles have much better throttle response and things of that sort. And so there's a lot of different benefits here. But like I said, there's compromises as well. And so I wonder if you would be willing to make those compromises. Would you feel that driving something like that, even if it was super convenient to park, you could have a tiny little garage and not have to worry about it, you could basically fit it anywhere, you could fit your bicycle, would that be enough for you to get over the appearance, possibly going a bit slower, not having as far range? Now, I think it's very easy in the case of something like the Tesla to say, well, that's a hot car, it's super fast, it goes really far. I would be perfectly fine with that. But the future of electric cars is probably going to be less like the Tesla, more like a mix between the Armadillo and my electric car, I would imagine. And so please let me know, what do you think about the future of automotive technology? Do you feel that any compromises need to be made? And if so, what compromises would you be willing to make? I know I cover more car stories than is probably strictly necessary, and I know that when it comes to things like climate change, cars are not the most important thing. Things like making more efficient appliances, naval vessels, planes, and things of that sort. Obviously, power plants. Like, these are obviously much more important. And one of the good things about electric cars is as you make the power plants cleaner, the electric cars become cleaner because the power that they're getting is cleaner. That's something that can't be said about gasoline. But it's something that everybody uses. Like, everybody has a car for the most part, here and in other countries, and it just has such a large impact on our day. So culturally, like, we identify with the sort of cars that our country likes. Like, we like muscle cars, we like big SUVs. Like, this weaves its way through our culture, and so it's something that I'm very interested in. But that is all the stories I'm going to be able to cover today. I'm obviously going to be filming more over the course of the next week, and as always, any stories you'd like to see covered, any topics you'd like to see covered, if you want to see more video game stories, if you want to see more movie and politics stories, more environmental news, more security and military news, I always find that to be very exciting. As a side note, if you ever see a cool weapons demonstration, feel free to send me a link to the video. I would love to look at it. But until then, bye-bye.